I have Craig Siegel, and he is a mindset coach, obviously a podcast coach. If you haven't heard the CLS experience, you have not heard a podcast, one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. He's also the founder of Cultivate Lasting Symphony. That's the CLS of the CLS experience. Craig, I just have to, before we start, tell you there's certain guests that I've had. I have over 600 and some guests, biggest billionaires, millionaires, entrepreneurs, celebrities, athletes, entertainers. And every once in a while, I see the names on my list for the day, and I get this tingly feeling that I got a superstar coming in. And I get more excited about the superstars that nobody knows about than I do the Danica Patricks and the Dan Aykroyds and the Cameron Diaz's of the world, because everybody expects those people to have a higher frequency. But I love when I bring someone like you on that has the frequency of success, the mindset of success, the desire that they must be what they can be, which is all displayed on the CLS experience. Brother, where did that start for you?
First of all, thank you so much for the love and the compliments. It means a lot coming from anyone, but specifically you, Dave, as you know how much respect and how high I hold you in terms of just everything. In terms of the passion and the drive, I've always had a tremendous amount of drive and determination. The issue was, Dave, is I wasn't able to place it in the correct purpose or passion. Like I didn't know what exactly was my passion. And just like you, I was on Wall Street years ago and I had a ton of success. And as anyone can imagine, the audience listening, with finance and Wall Street, there's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs and so forth. But also, like similar to you, is I wasn't living in a state of gratitude like I am now. And ultimately, I was able to finally identify what fuels my passion, my fire. And it just so happens, like, not to sound too spiritual, but when the pandemic happened and I heard the whispers, not only is this my passion, helping people revamp their mindsets and fulfill their potential and so forth, but it's also my purpose. And once I realized like that the writing was on the wall, I just went all in. I didn't hesitate at all. So to answer your question, I've had the drive for a long time. I've just been looking for the correct outlet. And finally, I can honestly say I'm living in my vision as I'm here talking to you today.
That's awesome, man. And to revamp a mindset, you indicate an art of revamping a mindset. And I can't think of a better place to revamp your mindset, especially with what's going on in the stock market right now. You're a Wall Street guy. I've gave and learned my lessons on focusing my emotional attention to something that's not stable, that I don't have control of. And part of, for me, revamping my mindset is knowing I have control of my mindset, my heart set, and my conscious. Where did you transform those lessons from working within the context of really an unstable, personal, professional environment called Wall Street, as we saw today with GameStop? I know people look back on this and
Insane.
It's just another reiteration of, this is not a true stable environment to revamping a mindset that you have control of.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And so when I got to Wall Street a little bit out of college is when I started studying within, right? I started studying neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. And that was when I realized that nobody's broken. It's just that our frames can be warped or corrupted. And by altering, literally like tilting my head to change your perspective, everything opens up. And when you adjust your map of the world, your world changes. And so I realized that I was capable of so much more. And I've applied this to the marathons that I ran a couple of years back. But ultimately, just like you just said, with all the chaos right now in the stock market, there's just too much unpredictability. And the art of the mindset is one thing, just like you just alluded to. You could control what you give certain emotions to, right? Like we can even go as far as change what we associate pain and pleasure to on a very deep level. But when it comes to, like you said today, GameStop and crazy stocks, it's just out of our control. And it's too much. It's too crazy. And so simply put, I just want to help people understand what they're capable of, fulfill their purpose and their passion, and ultimately exceed even what they think is possible for them in terms of their potential. And with the mindset and the art of the revamp mindset, once you're unplugged, so to speak, or awakened, as I like to say, it's not what can I do? It's what can't we do?
And awakening is an interesting term because it doesn't happen overnight, right? I'm a big evolution person, not a revolution person. I can look back and connect the dots backwards to facilitate how things have evolved, how they've segmented, how they've accelerated and grown within the context of what my own behaviors were, my attention and intention, but guys like you and I were hard-hitting, persistent, scarce, competitive people, yet we were introduced to NLP, to TLC, to quantum healing and physics and metaphysics. And, like you said, you're a very spiritual person now, but I think it's important for you to share with people the resistance that you had initially to spirituality. And then why were you open to NLP, which obviously has allowed you to evolve, to woke or awaken or pursue a different journey of enlightenment?
Yeah. Unbelievable questions, Dave. And the truth of the matter is when I was in college and everything prior, even though there were signs that I had that entrepreneurial spirit, I was essentially lost in the wilderness with no compass. I didn't know what I wanted to do per se. I didn't know what I was capable of and so forth. And so after college, when I got to Wall Street, I simultaneously was so interested in finding out how I can improve. Because I was the young rookie on the block and I wanted to be successful and I had that drive and that passion and I wanted to place it in the appropriate places. And so I stumbled upon NLP and basically just the concept that becoming unplugged or awakened, so to speak, and you revamp your mindset, there's nothing that you can't accomplish. And I started to see results. I utilized techniques such as modeling and anchoring and so forth. And all of a sudden, my map of the world expanded. And where I used to have limits, I started to see opportunities. It was literally like everything was limitless. And I started to have a ton of success that I never thought possible for me. And so it was around this time after college, right when I got to Wall Street, that I went on such a deep dive and started to explore the mindset and my spirit. And then ultimately, when I start to see those results being manufactured, I opened myself up also to spirituality and stuff of that nature, and also living in a state of gratitude. And I think it's all intertwined and all connected. And so once I started doing that, like I said, the shackles came off and I was able to really fly.
Another reason I wanted to have you on the podcast is that, my mission to empower over 1 billion people, I need 1,000 people like you. I'm looking and seeing, okay, who and where are the seeds that I can plant for the trees that I may never sit under? Who are the, must be what I can be people that live and have learned to live with passion and have evolved to this point. And with CLC podcast, you have a platform to empower 1,000, which, expands and accelerates my mission of over 1 billion people to be happy. But you also have a personal purpose behind CLS and the podcast itself. And I respect that because most of the mission in my life was motivated by my own mom. And I know your parents play an integral role in why you created the podcast and why you're so passionate about spreading the light through your podcast.
Yeah, such a great point, Dave. And the premise of the CLS experience is as follows. I like to have big, recognizable, legendary juggernauts on the show, people that everyone knows the name of them, such as the big bad David Meltzers of the world. But where everybody thinks that like when you have these big names, you're going to talk success stories. Here's the thing. We have Wikipedia for that. What I like to do is do a deep dive, and I do mean deep, into what was the mindset like when great guys like you or women or so forth, what was the mindset like when you were at adversity, when you were at rock bottom? How did you ricochet off? How did you push through challenges? Like, what was the mindset required? Because it wasn't so long ago that even though I was doing well in business, I was just unfulfilled and I wasn't happy and I had a lot going on and this was my rock bottom. And I didn't like the path I was going down. So with the CLS experience, if we can have a huge audience, and which we do, we already have 20,000 downloads in 2 weeks. A lot of that has to do with you. Thank you so much. I love you. But the point is that people see these big, extraordinary juggernauts and larger than life people. But now we talk about the humility, right? Like the vulnerability side. Like, what was the mindset like when they were not flying high? How did they overcome that and achieve the massive success like you have? I think that's what's so important, because that's what people can take, and then they can take tangible techniques and apply them to their life.
I love that for one reason. I remember when I started my podcast, Even my radio show before there was podcasts, it was always about bringing on the juggernauts to share, those stories, the more interested than interesting questions that I saw when I came on your podcast that you asked. And those really involve that deep-seated mindset, the emotionally tied heart set of how you felt. And then also desire and light and persistence that is evading and pursuing, through your CLS experience and the playbook that I do, all the similarities that I see. But one of the interesting things I've learned from you is you and I also share a relationship that is very symbiotic with failure and success. And that relationship is so important. And I love the way that you apply what you've learned for the age group that you're in, the experience that you've had, to have such an enlightened view of success and failure and the relationship between the two. Can you explain to me what that mindset, heart set, and desire is according to that relationship?
Yeah, what an unbelievable question once again. And between successes and failures, like the highs and the lows, especially when you're an entrepreneur, right? It doesn't just go like this. You don't just coast unless, you're not looking for a ton of success. But when you really want to live life and take shots or take a swing, there's going to be a ton of challenges. But, and I've heard you say this several times before, as long as the win column has a little bit more than the loss column, then you're good. And the truth of the matter is we don't grow as much from the success stories, Dave, do we? We grow from the challenges and the times we fall. And I think what's so important is a lot of people fall and they face obstacles and they don't get back up. And like a lot of my clients, when I begin with them, they have this defeated mindset. It doesn't have to be like that. You can own your past, own your story. It doesn't have to own you. And so I think that we learned so much from the trials and the tribulations that we go to, so that the next time we do have a ton of success, we're doing it with a better mindset and for the right reasons. For example, living in a state of gratitude, which I'm doing right now. I know you are as well. But, once upon a time, you and I both weren't. So it's so important to learn so much that we can from the failures so that the next time we begin to fly, we do it the right way.
I love that, man. And one of the other things I have difficulty explaining to people, a very frequent question, is about frequency itself. Frequency is determinative upon the uniqueness, the organic nature of yourself, what they call now an overused term, authentic, being or self. And it's so important, especially in the digital realm, to be authentic and organic, but it's really a frequency. And one of the areas of frequency is differentiation. Differentiation is an aggregation or an accumulation of sameness, oneness, and appreciation. How do you differentiate yourself in a very crowded, very loud, very chaotic space like podcasting? I thought there was a lot of podcasts when I started. I think there was 600,000. Now there's over 2 million podcasts and growing every day. How do you differentiate yourself and your frequency?
Yeah, so a couple different ways. Number one, I think the most obvious answer is the energy. I try to always be in an elevated state and bring up the state of every single human being that I interact with. And so I take great pride in that. Every single time I have a conversation with someone, whether it's the guy downstairs at the deli or it's someone on the CLS experience, I want them to get away from that encounter feeling elevated. That's very important to me. Make people feel good. And also, even though you just used it, it's a very trendy word, being authentic, being real, being relatable, being humble, and also like showing a vulnerabilities, right? Like showing the world who you really are, not like just, as I like to say, like the guy with the Rolex sitting next to a sports car. Let people see like your history, like what made you, what shaped you. And I think that's what the audiences really relate to. Like, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but like what I always loved comic books when I was coming up. And even though Superman is cool, to me, he wasn't relatable because he was unbeatable and he was basically unstoppable. I always gravitated towards people who, were a little bit more relatable or a little bit humane, such as Batman and so forth. And so,
Batman's superpower is that he's rich. That's why I identified with Batman.
That's great. But yeah, he's human and he's been through stuff and, you can get behind that, so to speak. And so the reason why I think CLS has grown so fast, and I say this as humbly as I possibly can, because I know this day and age, because there's such a oversaturation of not only podcasts, but coaches and speakers and so forth, is that number one, I think people could see that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And number two, you have to have an unparalleled ability to communicate with people, right? Like you have to speak to someone and that person has to make you want to get better or make you want to revamp your mindset. It's like back in school, like you could have a professor with such a high IQ and you knew they were so smart, but if they didn't have any charisma, you might fall asleep in class. And so as much value as you and I have, you have to be able to portray it in a way where people want to listen, get the value, and then apply action. I think that's key.
Well, when I watch Craig Landon Siegel, CLS, I think about enthusiasm, and enthusiasm has a root, which is entheos, which means God, connected to God, to the greatest source of light, love, and lessons. And I can tell, you're bouncing off the walls. It's taken me years to be able to sit down when I do this because I'm watching you dance around. And I remember even on my IG Live, people going, dude, stand still. And it's amazing how much energy you have. Last question, because you and I lived through that source of power, light, and lessons. We lived through entheos, enthusiastic lives of passion and purpose and profitability. One of the things people ask is, hey, number one, do you ever turn it off? And two, aren't you afraid of burning out? How do you have that weighted balance in your life to, number one, be able to turn it off? And two, because it's difficult for me, but two, not to burn out?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And I'll be straight up with you, Dave, as I always am. It's still something that I'm working on. Life is a journey. It's not really a destination, so to speak. So I'm still working on being able to provide a little bit of boundary, so to speak, because when you're new into something and you're so excited about it and you have a ton of passion, I know you can relate better to anybody. You just want to go 100 miles an hour all the time. But the truth of the matter is just like fitness, right? You can't work out the same muscle every day or the body will get used to it. Your mind, it's so important that you give it a little bit of rest. And so what I like to do is at a certain point at night, regardless of what's going on, I like to check out. And that might be just turn the brain off a little bit, maybe watch some sports or something that I don't have to think too hard. You have to set those boundaries because something that I had to learn, and this is so valuable to the audience, even if you're doing what you absolutely love, if you're going 100 miles an hour and you don't come up for air, you will burn out. And so the key is give yourself some time and be strategic in when you take a load off, so to speak, or shut it down a little bit so you can recharge not only your body, but your mind.
Well, you're like a young Gary Vee there and you're always on. And unfortunately, I don't think for you and Gary, watching sports is a turned down type of situation. When you're a Jets fan, all it does is create more stress and anxiety. And now who knows, I'm a Chargers fan, so I have a little reprieve with Justin Herbert finally giving me a little bit of joy, but yet they still brought down a 7-9 frustrating season. Craig Siegel, man, people, you got to keep your eye on this guy. The Cultivate Lasting System, the CLS. He is the founder of that, but the podcast itself is the CLS Experience. Also his initials, in case you want to know, it's Craig Langdon Siegel. But most importantly, he is a mindset master, an entrepreneur, and through it all, he intertwines my most important rule. When I think of this, I think of Craig Siegel. Be kind to your future self and do good deeds, because this guy's doing good deeds everywhere. He's abundant, he's happy, he's healthy, and he's empowering people and inspiring them enthusiastically in Theos. And I suggest everyone tune in to Craig Siegel and, of course, the CLS Experience. This is Dave Meltzer with the new up-and-coming Gary Vee, Craig Siegel, here on Entrepreneurs, the Playbook.